40 seconds remaining, a 2-for-1 for Atlanta if they hurry here. It's McCollum, turning the corner, step away, Jay goes down! C.J. McCollum! Take its timeout, almost guaranteed here. And he missed both. Hart with the rebound, no timeout called. Get it up for Bridges, put it up for the win, and he missed it! Atlanta comes all the way back from 14 down and ties the series. They win game 2 in MSG.
Ned, who wrote me yesterday saying about my, persistent ask for everybody to watch the NBA playoffs, even non-NBA playoff fans. I think he said something to the effect of, how about, starting what you used to preach, which is under-promise and over-deliver instead of over-promising and under-delivering, which I've done, admittedly, when it comes to the NBA playoffs this time of year, and it's been 4 or 5 years running. And I think I've felt the pressure to do that because I have this feeling that many people that listen to this show and many of my friends just are off the NBA, and they've been off the NBA. And I'm like, it's fine to be off the NBA's regular season. But if you're a sports fan and you like drama, the NBA playoffs are near the top of the list. Well, not after weekend number 1, in which 7 of the 8 game ones were double-digit blowouts. And the 8th game was a 9-point difference. Last night, things changed. And, oh, by the way, if you were wondering why the team decided to move C.J. McCollum for an injured player in Trae Young, we've seen the reason for it. C.J. McCollum was playing really well for the Wizards before he got traded. I mean, he had a couple of games, on his way out that actually helped the Wizards win 4 of the last 5 games and 6 of the last 8 that he played in Washington. Like, the Wizards were rolling with C.J. McCollum, playing at a really high level. He was shooting like 50% from the floor for the Wizards before they traded him to Atlanta for Trae Young. And remember, Trae Young came injured. Now, he did end up playing some towards the end of the year. But think about that. The Wizards with C.J. McCollum before they traded him, they had won 6 of 8 games. Well, Michael Winger and Will Dawkins couldn't have that happen. They couldn't have C.J. McCollum single-handedly keep them from a protected pick situation to an unprotected pick situation. So they traded him, and he has played really well for the Atlanta Hawks. And last night was a really entertaining game and an entertaining performance by McCollum, who went for 32 points and led them from down 14 in the second half to an absolute stunning Madison Square Garden comeback win, 107-106. C.J. McCollum's one of those players that just knows and always has known how to get buckets. And I'm watching this game last night, Max, and I'm like, for all the people that were, and Ned wasn't the only one. It's like, God, I hope people are watching this game. I really hope they're watching this comeback in the Garden, which is the best atmosphere for a postseason game. By the way, Max, I urged all of my friends that don't even like hockey to go watch the highlights of the Sabres comeback. That was insane. This time of year, I love because you get real atmospheres, that you don't get during the regular season. You just don't. These two sports, hockey and the NBA, this time of year are completely different from their regular season predecessors. It's just a completely different sport in the NBA, from the way the players play the game to the way the fans react to the games. And it was electric last night. And C.J. McCollum, I'm not going to make him out to be Reggie Miller, and what Reggie Miller did to the Knicks in the Garden multiple times, including that epic 25-point fourth quarter and 8 points in 17 seconds back in the mid-'90s. But C.J. McCollum was an absolute killer at 34 years old in the Garden. And you could tell that it's like, wow, I'm in the Garden in the postseason. It fires up the opponent as much as it fires up the home team. And is he, for you basketball people that watched this last night, is he ever crafty? I mean, floaters, fadeaways, pump fakes, drives high off the glass over outstretched bigger arms. He just knows and always has known how to get buckets. He was sensational in the fourth quarter last night, although up 107-106 with 7.5 seconds left. He missed 2 free throws. They fouled him, and he actually missed 2 free throws. You could almost say it was a bit of a choke on the second one in particular, which was super short. But the Knicks missed a shot. Mikal Bridges missed a shot at the buzzer. Not sure why they didn't give the ball to Brunson, although he was guarded pretty well. And the Hawks held on for a shocking 107-106 comeback win in the Garden to even up that series at a game apiece. By the way, that game, one of the things that, you see now in basketball, it's a 10-year thing. And it starts at the youth levels, I'm telling you, which is, not a lot of running of set plays. There isn't a lot of 5-man offenses anymore. There are some teams that do it. And you see it much more at the, high school and below level. But what it really is we are going to seek out the matchup that we want, and then we're going to let that player attack that weaker defender and either get a bucket himself or collapse the defense and dish it to somebody else who will score. And they consistently down the stretch sought out Jalen Brunson. I mean, McCollum was calling for Brunson. I don't know why they switch all those screens. I mean, how about not switching a screen so that Brunson ends up on McCollum? That's another story. But, man, did they really seek out Brunson. He is a brilliant scorer, but, man, does he struggle with his size and his feet to defend a crafty scorer like C.J. McCollum. Really exciting game last night, as was the late game, which goes to the Timberwolves against a Denver team with Nikola Jokic, who really struggled. Jokic and Murray in the fourth quarter, their 2 key players at home, really struggled. Jokic looked exhausted. If you stayed up and watched this game, usually it's in the fourth quarter, Jokic just takes the game over. He had 6 points at halftime of this game. Ended up with 24 and 15 rebounds and 8 assists. But he was 1 for 7 from behind the arc, 8 for 20 from the field, missed a couple of easy buckets that he normally scores on, got out-rebounded time and time again on the offensive glass, where I think Minnesota had something like, what was it, offensive rebound total? Let me see what it was, because it seemed like there was 6 or 7 of them in the second half. They had 10 for the game. I thought it was more than that, but Minnesota goes into Denver, steals it. That's the series. If you want a series, now Atlanta, New York, I still think the Knicks will prevail in that series. But if you want a series that is really fun to watch, compelling to watch, with major stars like Jokic, like Murray, like Anthony Edwards, Nuggets T-Wolves is your series. And that thing now knotted up at a game piece. The NBA playoffs much better on night 3 than it was on the first 2 days and nights. And C.J. McCollum, man, there's a little bit of Darren Peterson in his game. Do you see that? Did you watch it last night at all, Max?
I was more tuned into the hockey because we got a double overtime game.
Yeah, I saw.
In Ottawa and Carolina.
I didn't get the notice on the app.
Yeah, so I was locked into a lot of hockey last night. The Flyers smoked the Penguins too. The Penguins look like they're cooked.
C.J. McCollum, Darren Peterson is the kid from Kansas, right? This draft is going to go in order 1-2, A.J. DeBonsa, Darren Peterson in some order. Hopefully the Wizards end up with, 1 or 2. And I've comped Darren Peterson to guys like DeMar DeRozan. He's just such a smooth scorer. The difference between he and McCollum, I see Acuff like Lillard a little bit. Maybe Acuff has some McCollum in him too, but McCollum's really smooth and effortless in his scoring. He's just not as tall, I don't think. Darren Peterson's what, 6'6", right? McCollum's 6'3", 6'4", probably something like that. 6'3", 190. Yeah. So Peterson's a bit bigger. I enjoyed it last night. Really enjoyed it. And tonight you get, I mean, it's, every night now. And tonight you get, you get a game 2 with Rockets, Lakers. We'll see if KD plays in that game. Wembanyama is an absolute must-watch. I think there are a few must-watches in sports right now. Shohei Ohtani certainly on that list, without question. Victor Wembanyama is certainly on that list. I think Nikola Jokic is on that list as well. Those would be, you might have one or two in hockey that you would throw out as must-watches. But Wembanyama and Ohtani are so unique. They're must-watch. So, even if you don't like basketball, turn on and watch the 7'5", 3-point shooter. Seriously, because that's what he does. He shoots threes and then drives by you and dunks from 1 foot inside the free throw line. They're playing the Blazers tonight, and Denny Avdia was really good in the first game. The 76ers, Josh Harris's team, the team that he owns in the NBA, they don't have a chance against Boston. That is a total, I think that's got 4-1, maybe even 4-0 written all over it. All right, it is Tuesday, and the countdown to the NFL draft continues. We are 2.5 days away from the jingle, and the picks start coming in, and there's so many different opinions out there. I mean, it really is that time of year. It's like, who do you believe? Who's going to end up being right? I was thinking about something driving in, between the Todd McShays and the Adam Schefters, who, McShay's much more of a draft guy, but Schefter put out his intel report yesterday, which he's hit on, a few times in the last few years. Peter Schrager is convinced that it's Carnell Tate to Washington at 7. Kuiper's final big board is in. It came out earlier this morning. You'll get, Matt Miller's final mock draft coming up. Jordan Reed at ESPN had his final mock. He's got Jeremiah Love to Washington. I think the most exciting part of this draft isn't to get caught up in all of the predictions and to even audit those predictions because, if you go back, I mean, I doubt there's somebody that's been super consistent, super right for, a long period of time. They all tend to get, 30, 29, 30, 31 of the 32 players, maybe sometimes not that many. And usually the order is somewhat close, but I don't care as much about that as I do what I think is going to make the first round on Thursday night super entertaining. And that is after Mendoza, there's really no set order that people are in agreement on. Usually there is an idea of the top 2 or 3, and then maybe at 4 or 5, it starts to get to that key point. All right, what's that team? No, this thing starts at number 2 this year. It starts with what the Jets do at 2. Do they take Reese? Do they take Bailey? Is it possible that they deal out of 2? And it starts right there because you've seen Reese and Bailey both time and time again mock to the Jets. And then at 3, a big sort of turning point moment potentially. Do the Cardinals take Love? Do they trade the pick? Do they go O-line? And then Tennessee. What if Love's gone? Who do they go? Do they go the other of Bailey or Reese, whoever the Jets don't take? Is it possible they end up taking Styles or Tate? You look at this group of players, and I'll give you the list right now. All right, Reese, Bailey, Styles, Tate, Love, Delane, Bain, Downs. That's 8. And I'm not getting to the offensive linemen at this point, but there are going to be offensive linemen, or at least one taken in that top 9. Because I just gave you 8 players that have essentially been mocked to almost every single team from 2 through 10, for the most part. Now, if there's going to be an offensive lineman, whether it's Mauanoa or whether it's Fano or the kid from Penn State, one of those is going to go in that top 10 range, top 9 range. But after Mendoza, there are like 8 players that have essentially been mocked to every team from 2 to 9, basically, from the Jets through the Chiefs. I mean, the Chiefs have had Bain, Delane, Tate, Love, Styles even, Bailey even, if he were to fall, mocked. The Saints in front of the Chiefs have had all of those players mocked. Washington, I mean, let's count the number of players that have been mocked to Washington. I think the only 2 that haven't been mocked to Washington at this point are Reese and Bailey, because they're not expected to fall to that point. But Styles, Tate, Love, Bain, Delane, Downs, 6 players have been mocked more than once to Washington at 7. Am I right about that, Max? I don't think I'm missing one, because they certainly haven't had an offensive lineman mocked to them, and Bailey and Reese haven't fallen far enough to be mocked to them.
Yeah, it's really we're kind of shaping up for what could be a nightmare scenario, but even then, I still think that
what's your nightmare scenario? That Love, Styles,
and it would probably you'd probably just get down to
Tate aren't available.
Yeah, Downs, Tate aren't available. You would probably just get down to like Bain, Delane, or a couple of offensive linemen at the top of the draft.
I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm going to go through this on today's show. There are players, and Bain is one of them, that if they ended up taking Reuben Bain, I would be happy. I don't see how that guy doesn't turn into an absolute, excellent NFL player. The short arms, okay. His power, the moves, the way he dominated NFL caliber offensive linemen in college. I mean, I look at this board, and after the way Mendoza played and really the way Bailey played, because Bailey was dominant at Texas Tech, I don't think there's another player that just based on the tape is more impressive than Bain Jr. I mean, Mendoza and Reuben Bain, I think in terms of just turning on the tape and watching, are the 2 most impressive players in the draft in terms of the way they played in college. That's not the trick here. The trick is to project it to the next level. But both of those players played NFL caliber talent in college, just not mature NFL talent. Although some of those players are mature. I'll tell you, the guy that Bain played next to or on the other side of, Hakeem Mesidor, is 25 years old. He's a man. Somebody texted me, a friend of mine texted me and said that Chris at the beginning of the show said that he's in a massive disagreement with me over Mansour Delane. I don't know if you heard Chris say that or not. A friend of mine was listening after the show and said, Russell's saying that he's in a massive disagreement with you over Mansour Delane. I promise you I haven't talked to Chris once about Mansour Delane. We're going to get Chris. We'll try to get Chris on the show Thursday. We'll get Denton on the show. Denton's going to be hosting some shows this week for both stations. Denton, obviously a huge college football guy, and we'll start to make picks. But I like Mansour Delane. My friend said that's Russell's favorite player. Is that true, Max?
Delane
is Russell's favorite player in the draft?
I don't know that he's his favorite player, but
okay. I like Delane. I just would prefer Delane, if he's going to be the pick, to be a pick after a trade back, even if it's 2 spots to the Chiefs. And it's possible that they risk losing him if they trade back. But I'm okay with losing Delane at 7 or at 9 or at 11. He's one of those that I like a lot, like Jeremiah Love. I like a lot. I just wouldn't pick if I had a trade back opportunity. Bailey and Bain are the 2 that could be there, and Bailey probably wouldn't be there. That I think I would say, no, I'm okay not trading back. I'm going to take one of those 2 players. I don't feel that way about Delane, but I'll tell you what, watching Delane and really the highlight stuff, he's going to be a good corner. He's going to be a very good corner. I do like him. If that's Russell's favorite player, it's a good favorite player to have. I think he's going to be a really good player. And, like Styles, like Tate, fills a major need if that player ends up being, the highest rated player on the board. The corner that's been hurt a lot. Why am I blanking right now?
McCoy,
thank you. Jermod McCoy might be just as good as Delane. In terms of, like, everybody says this is a one-corner draft. If McCoy didn't have the injury history that he has, he might be the number one corner. He is really good. Now you gotta deal with some of the injuries with him. But Delane would be fine. I just would rather have Delane at 9 in a trade back with Kansas City, who wants to jump up to get Love, or trade back to 11 with Miami. And maybe Delane's still there. Maybe Tate's there. Some of the more recent stuff is that Jordan Tyson could be the first receiver taken in this draft. He wouldn't be my first receiver. I'm not taking a receiver, no matter how talented that receiver is, that's had the recent injury history. You look at skill position players. I was reading this over the weekend. Skill position players that have had an injury history in college tend to have that same injury bug issue when they get to the NFL. You know who doesn't get hurt? Carnell Tate. And Tate, to me, I still think he's the best receiver in the draft. I get the obsession with Jordan Tyson. But Tate, to me, if they picked him at 7, I'd be fine with it. But he's another one that I would accept a trade back on because of the number of receivers in this draft. I would take a trade back on if he weren't there. 2 players, Bailey, Bain. If either one of those players is there at 7, I'm taking one of those 2 players. That's me. That's how I feel. I would not pass on Bailey. I would not pass on Bain. I'd pass on almost every other player that could fall to 7, including Styles, including Downs, including Love, including Tate, including Delane. If there was a solid trade back opportunity that allowed me to pick up additional picks, what would be outstanding is to pick up a second rounder with a move back. 2 spots to Kansas City probably does not equal a second rounder, not the Chiefs' second rounder anyway. A trade back to 11 and beyond, now you're into getting a second round pick. I'd like to not have to wait after 7, another 64 picks before you're on the clock again. And that's where it stands right now. If they pick at 7, they don't trade back, 71 is their next pick, which comes, later in the night, Friday night. They'll have to wait more than 24 hours to make their second pick. They're just, other than Bailey and Bain, for me, there aren't players worthy of passing on volume over quality. All right. There is, some news out there on Washington and the draft. We'll get to some of that. Also, 2 guests on the show today. Mitch Tischler is going to jump on with us at 11. We'll find out who Mitch likes and wants for Washington at 7. And then Thor Nystrom, one of my favorite draft analysts. He's entertaining. He does a top 500 big board. And he's one of those guys that says, I hate, for whatever reason, I don't understand the people that say, yeah, I don't like giving a pro comp. It's just unfair. Unfair to whom? I mean, this is entertainment. And Thor embraces the entertainment part. In his top 500 big board, he assigns a professional, past or present, comparable for every player in his top 500. And there were some, as he put it out last week, that make a lot of sense to me. So he'll join us a little bit later on. in the show. I do want you to know that if you have been thinking about, hey, I need new windows, my windows are old, they are hard to open, they're cracked, the paint's peeling, they're not as efficient, meaning I'm spending more on air conditioning in the summer, heating in the winter. Window Nation is offering right now, the more you buy, the more you save sale, which means you could save up to 50% off your purchase if you purchase enough windows. Half price is the upside. Plus, if you choose to finance the purchase, they're not going to charge you interest, 0% interest for 5 full years. During uncertain times, one of the best investments you can make is in your home, and windows are a big part of that. Visit windownation.com or call them at 866-90Nation to schedule your free in-home estimate. They'll come out when it's convenient for you. In an hour or less, you'll have a quote in hand, and that'll be it. You reach back out to them if you want to move forward. They're not going to pressure you. They're not going to obligate you to anything. Window Nation is the #1 window installation company in America per Forbes magazine. 866-90Nation, windownation.com. What I got is Mike Tomlin was certainly the most sought after uh, TV personality after retiring as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he has landed at NBC's Sunday Night Football pregame show. I mean, this is one of the biggest NFL television free agents we've seen in years. His addition to the NBC Sunday night pregame show called Football Night in America means that Tony Dungy is out. You know, Dungy was not my favorite on that show. There were a lot of us that literally before the Sunday night game, if you weren't sure who to bet on, you just waited for Dungy to make his pick and just go opposite. I guarantee you that probably hit 60% of the time to go opposite of Dungy. But you'll have Chris Sims, Rodney Harrison, I think it's Maria Taylor, Jason Garrett, right? They've got a lot of people on that set, but Mike Tomlin's going to join that set too. I would have, I like that spot for Tomlin. I would have loved to have had Tomlin on games, like being a lead analyst on games. It's not something that a lot of the guys, when they get this opportunity, want to do, because the truth is it takes a lot more work to, prepare for one individual game. Plus you have to get in early to those cities, sometimes on Friday, to meet with coaches and quarterbacks. And so some of the guys, especially some of the super high profile guys that have choices, prefer to do a studio bit because they can literally show up to that studio set, 2 hours before showtime. It doesn't have to be 2 days before showtime. But man, Mike Tomlin, what's he going to be like as a TV personality? Because I'm not sure there's been a better quote among coaches for a long period of time. I think he'll be excellent. Looking forward to it. I wonder how long he'll do it. Wonder if he'll go back to coaching or not. But that is where Mike Tomlin, the most sought after off-season NFL television free agent, has landed. The Football Night in America show on NBC. I was considering the possibilities for Washington week 1. I'll have my mock schedule out in a few weeks. I know you're looking forward to that. But I wonder if Washington's going to be a team that the schedule makers look at and say they still have Jaden Daniels and they still could be a pretty big draw in some high-profile spots. Could you get, a Washington-Dallas, as an example, Sunday night opener? It seems like you get Dallas in that Sunday night opener a lot. I think the schedule makers are going to know why Washington was 5-12. While it does seem like a lot of people, including people who are NFL analysts and pundits, talk about the step back season for Jaden Daniels and they regress to the mean. It's mind-boggling to me if you're covering the NFL and you don't say, well, yeah, of course Washington was 5-12, but they were 5-12 with a different group of players than we expected they would have when the season began. But if they come back and they assume, well, they can't be as injured as they were last year, and you've got Jaden Daniels on the field, Washington's still going to get, mark my words, no less than 4 and more likely 5 standalone spots. I mean, they're going to have the UK game for starters. That's a given. Are they going to be on Thanksgiving or Christmas? Possibly. They're going to be on Sunday Night Football. They're going to be on Monday Night Football. They're going to be on Thursday Night Football. There are going to be 4 to 5 standalone games for Washington in 2026, even though they were a 5-12 team. I would bet that they're the worst team from last year that gets the most standalone spots in 2026. Yeah. I mean, their opponents, just pulling up the list again, are good ones. I mean, they have their NFC East opponents, but they have Seattle, the Rams, the Texans. I think with the Dexter Lawrence trade, a team that's going to expect to contend, the Bengals at home. On the road, they've got the 49ers, the Jags on the road, along with their division foes. Yeah, mark them down right now, Max. Remember I said this, because it'll be in my mock schedule, not draft. 5 standalone games for Jaden Daniels and company. He's a big draw. Sunday Night Football will be one of them. So there you go. Mike Tomlin to Sunday Night Football. So there was something put out by ESPN's Seth Walder about 40 speed versus game speed. And for me, this is kind of interesting when it comes to Carnell Tate, who ran a 4.5, 3, I think, at the Indy Combine Day, and then decided not to run on his pro day. Now, we had a caller, an Ohio State fan, I think, that said he stumbled a little bit in the 40 time, and apparently he was not overly worked up about his 40 time. But Seth Walder at ESPN wrote about 40 speed versus game speed. Puka Nakua's 40-yard dash at his 2023 pro day was 4.56. Not impressive. Pro days tend to be, a bit faster than even the combine, which is why I thought Carnell Tate would run on his pro day. But historically, pro days, maybe it's that it's a favorable and a friendly timer, but they tend to be faster times than the combine. But Nakua was not, because of that 40 time, just wasn't thought to be an elite prospect. He runs a lot faster than that when he's fully clothed in a football uniform in the midst of a competition on a field against guys who are trying to take his head off. Play speed is much different than top end speed. And Seth Walder kind of spells it out. He writes, play speed is a composite of several performance metrics, such as top end speed, speed over expected, and acceleration. And a model that combines it with 40 times better predicts NFL speed. In these cases, the average of a wide receiver's 5 fastest speeds on pass plays in their first 4 seasons is more important than 40 times alone. And the differences are often drastic, he writes. 2 of the top receivers stand out with this measure. Amari Cooper ran a not Amari Cooper. Omar Cooper Jr. ran a 4.42 at the combine this year, but his play speed adjusted is 4.36. Mekhi Lemon ran a 4.46 at the combine, but his play speed was actually higher than that at 4.53. Looking at the overall play speed is so much more important than looking at the 40 time. Now, they don't have the Tate information in here because Tate did not run a 40 time at his pro day. But play speed, adjusted time, I guarantee you would be very, very favorable for Carnell Tate. If you watch Carnell Tate at Ohio State, he does not run during his, on the field like a guy who who doesn't have top end elite speed. He gets separation. He pulls away from people when fully uniformed. Big difference. So Peter Schrager has been talking a lot the last couple of days. What is Schrager's track record? I really don't even care that much, but I saw a lot of people telling me on Twitter before the show that Schrager is a real savant when it comes to this time of year. Is that true or not? Do you know?
I don't know his hit rate, but I know he's gotten at least a few right. I mean, Schrager's in the know.
Well, he thinks Washington is all in on Carnell Tate. I wouldn't mind Tate. I like Tate. He's my favorite receiver in the draft. If a trade back is there at 7, I would trade back. But if they ended up taking Tate, I wouldn't mind it. And I've already said this, and I know many of you think I am absolutely nuts. But I would take, if you told me they're taking an offensive player at 7, I would take Tate over Love. I would. I think the position is much more impactful to winning, and I think it'll be more impactful in Washington's offense. And again, that is a player they desperately need on offense. I would love to see Tate and Terry as a combo, 1-2 or 1-1A in that order. He wrote, the Commanders are very, very high on Ohio State wide receiver Carnell Tate, Peter Schrager, yesterday. Quote, I've heard Carnell Tate is their guy. This could change, but Carnell Tate could be sitting there at 7. You pair him with Terry McLaurin, and you go to work. Okay. I mean, do it. I mean, at 7, they may not have a trade back opportunity. That is for sure. There's no guarantee they're going to have a trade back opportunity. Adam Peters said last week he thinks they'll end up selecting at 7 because there won't be those opportunities in this draft. How much do you think our fan base would hate it if Tate and Love were on the board at the same time and Tate was the selection? My gut is that would not be a popular pick in that moment. I'd be totally fine with it. You'd be upset, wouldn't you?
Tate?
Yeah.
No. My order has been Styles, Downs, Love, and Tate is really the fourth guy that I'd be like, okay. I mean, Reuben Bain, I wouldn't go crazy over. David Bailey, I wouldn't go crazy over. I'd be happy with Bain. I think Bailey's going to be good, but there's still some question marks there. It just depends on how high he goes. But honestly, like with our spot, you're pretty much, I don't want to say guaranteed a good player, but you've got the best shot. You know what I mean? Especially in this draft class, because it feels very like after the top, maybe 11 or 12, it kind of takes a fall off.
I'm just telling you, if Love is there at 7 and this team takes anybody but Love, I think that's going to be a real downer for people.
Yeah, well, Schefter, actually, I got some audio from his pod. They were talking about who that he thinks that the Commanders are going to end up taking and discussing, going through it. But he claims that Jeremiah Love will not make it past 7. He thinks he goes before 7, but he doesn't think he makes it past.
I think we talked about
I'm pretty sure he's brought it up on the show.
Yeah, is that the floor is 7, and 3 is the best case with Arizona. I'm just saying that there is an infatuation with Jeremiah Love. And look, it's not just an infatuation. A lot of these guys that have been doing this for years and evaluating prospects, whether they're credible or not, Jeremiah Love is on the overall top 3 on everybody's board, pretty much. He's a top 3 player on almost everybody's board. Now, I know that my guest, Thor Nystrom at 12, because I've already seen his big board, I know that he actually does not have Jeremiah Love in his top 3. But people have decided that Jeremiah Love is the next great running back. And I think he's going to be really good. I don't think he's going to be the next superstar elite player. That's why I wouldn't take him at 7. And I would take other players in front of him, and I would definitely trade back if that were an opportunity. I just think that the idea that Love could be there at 7 and that Washington could add him to a backfield that's already got Jaden Daniels is exciting to our fan base. And if they added Jeremiah Love, I'd be excited too, because it would be an upgrade, a major upgrade. And the combination of he and Daniels would be a hell of a lot of fun to watch. It's too early for me at 7 for that position, but it's not like I don't think he's going to be a good player. But I'm convinced that would be the most disappointing scenario on Thursday night. Love is there, and they don't take Love. And in terms of the players that would really, in order, really, I think, anger the fan base more than any other, is if they took Tate over Love, number one. That would be number one. I think people would understand to a certain degree Styles over Love. I don't think they'd understand Downs over Love. I don't think they'd understand Delane over Love. I don't think they'd understand Bain over Love. I don't think they'd understand, say, Jordan Tyson if that was their number one wide receiver. Schrager says Tate's their number one, wide receiver, and actually the guy that they're going to take if he's there at 7. If Bailey dropped, I don't think people would be that upset. Styles is the only one that wouldn't truly piss off our fan base if he's there, if Love's there. That's my sense of it. But we'll see. I don't think he's going to be there. Actually, part of me thinks he is going to be there. Part of me thinks a lot of this conversation about him is media driven more than it is team driven. We'll see. Can't wait for Thursday night. Mitch Tischler is going to join us at 11 a.m. To talk draft. Definitely interested to hear what Mitch thinks. He studies it hard. When we come back, somebody's having maybe the best off season, and it's a surprise to many. I'll share with you the answer to that when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So somebody's having a really good offseason, and boy, did he need it. Buzz Williams Terps last year went 11-21. They were 4-16 in the Big Ten. It was the worst season of my lifetime in so many different ways. And they're not sitting back and just hoping. He already had one of the top incoming freshman classes in America. It was pretty much widely considered a top 5 incoming freshman class, but that's not the way you build rosters, anymore. You build rosters in the portal, with grown men. You need, 23-year-olds, not 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Not that last year's freshman class wasn't awesome around the country, and we saw so many of them, including DeBonsa and Cam Boozer and Acuff and Ament, and the list goes on and on with all of the freshmen that made significant contributions to their teams this year. But you've got to have grown men in college sports these days. And Maryland already had the young part, the incoming freshman class, at a high level. But over the last week and a half, Buzz Williams has now added 6 players to Maryland's roster via the portal. And the combined incoming freshman players, along with the portal players they have signed, people believe Maryland has put themselves in position to be a preseason top 25 team. From 11-21 overall, 4-16 in the Big Ten, to borderline preseason top 25. They added 6'10" Tomislav Buljan, who played at New Mexico last year. In the Mountain West, he averaged a double-double and shot 54% from the floor and was the number 4 offensive rebounder in the country. They also added a player who played deep into the NCAA tournament to the Elite Eight in Bishop Boswell, who was one of Tennessee's full-time starters. He is a big-time defender in the backcourt and can handle it and play really either the point or the off-guard position. They added DJ Wagner, son of DeJuan Wagner, followed Calipari from Kentucky to Arkansas. 5-star prospect coming out of high school, didn't really live up to it at either Kentucky or Arkansas, but a talented player who played well at times for an Arkansas team that made it into the second weekend of the tournament. They added Mabrian Jabriel. He's a 6'9" shooter from Queens College or Queens University, whichever one it is. I think it's Queens University, the school in North Carolina that actually made it into the NCAA tournament. He shot 42.5% from behind the arc. Maryland needed shooters. They added Robert Jennings, just a veteran 23, 24-year-old defensive muscle guy. And then yesterday, they added the 5th-ranked three-point shooter in the country last year, percentage-wise, in Mike McNair from Boston University, a 6'5" sniper. These are the kinds of dudes, by the way, played in, small league that you just know he can shoot it from anywhere, and he gets to that upper tier D1 level like the Big Ten. And if the team around him is good enough, he ends up blowing up into a big-time scorer. They've added 6 really good players. The combo of incoming freshman class and portal is top 5 in the country. It actually was number 1 on 24/7 Sports. And the Terps are pressing the outskirts of the preseason top 25 for next year and probably a preseason top 4 or 5 in the Big Ten. Now, will it work? You never know. The key in college sports these days is talent evaluation for the type of team you're going to coach. I'll tell you, I know that Maryland fans can't stand Kevin Willard. You know what he's really good at? Not only talent evaluation, but how it all fits together. That Crab 5 team in 2024, the Derek Queen, the Jacoby Gillespie, Rodney Rice, Selton Miguel matched, adding to the Juju Reese return, it was the perfect, fit everywhere. It just fit perfectly. He did the same thing at Villanova this year. They were supposed to stink. Put together a team. He's lost some of those players in the portal, but put together a team that finished third in the Big East and made it to the NCAA tournament when they weren't supposed to do it. You got to be good, not just evaluating the talent, but understanding how the pieces fit with one another. And can they come together quickly? Because you don't have a lot of time. This is a yearly thing. This is yearly free agency. But Maryland's going to put a starting 5 and a starting 8 with the return of Mills and Payne on the floor that on paper is going to have a chance to be a really good college basketball team next year. So good for Buzz. They gave him the money to go do what he needed to do. Now you got a roster. Let's hope that it gets coached up and it comes together nicely for a completely different season next year. All right, Mitch Tischler will join me next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Mitch Tischler covers the team for Monumental Sports and for the Beltway Football Podcast with JP Finley. You can follow Mitch on X at Mitch_Tischler. And we are here 2 days before the draft. And Odyssey's sports draft coverage is presented nationally by Bet365, where winning is everything. Download the Bet365 app and lock in your picks before the game begins. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in select states only. And draft coverage is also brought to you by Liberty Mutual Insurance. Only pay for what you need. So before, Mitch, we get to Thursday night and beyond, yesterday for about an hour, I took calls on the worst pick in franchise history and the best pick in franchise history. I'm putting you on the spot. I could have prepared you better for this and given you time to think about it, which is fine. But do answers pop to your mind on both of those?
Ooh, there's a bunch of them. One of the best pick has to be Sean Taylor. Just the story around kind of how he ended up in Washington, how he ended up being a Redskin. Clinton Portis talking about Kellen Winslow and the team, and Joe Gibbs loving him, wanting to take him, and then going to the coach and being like, hey, this guy will be will be the best player you ever took. And obviously we know who Sean Taylor ended up becoming. Worst pick, maybe it's recency bias a little bit. I think Dwayne Haskins has to rank up there, both because of the way that it went down with, Dan Snyder calling in the pick from the yacht, and then also obviously kind of the play on the field. Who knows what he could have developed into, obviously a tragic situation and all that, but the play on the field was never spectacular when he was out there.
Yeah, a lot of people in follow-up to the conversation yesterday, Max, said Haskins. And I think you actually said to me during the break yesterday, what about Haskins? Haskins, like Mitch just said, on one level is one of the worst because nobody in the room other than Snyder thought that he was a first-round graded player. They didn't have a first-round grade on him, and they didn't want to take him in the draft. And that was truly a Snyder selection. And then Snyder, threw everybody a bone and said, trade back up and get your guy Sweat if that's what you want to do, which they did later on in the draft. So from that standpoint, I totally get it. But for me, Mitch, Schuler at 3, who literally could not play the position and started 13 games for the Redskins, Heath Schuler did, was the worst. And I went with, I love Sean Taylor at 5, and the story that Clinton told us many years ago is a great one. But I went with Russ Grimm in the 3rd round. He ended up essentially being the best guard in the 1980s, and they got him at number 69 in the 3rd round. There's actually a lot to choose from in terms of their best, but you hit on 2 good ones. So if we look back 10 years from now and say that the 2026 draft, the pick at number 7 was one of the best in franchise history, who was the player?
Wow. That's asking a lot of whoever they end up taking there. The guy that I've been highest on all draft period has been Carnell Tate. I love this kid. I think, we're in a portion of the year between, January and April for the draft where, you're getting more information based on combine numbers and height and weight and speed and all these different things. And this is not just for Carnell Tate individually, but for all these guys. And you forget about the production on the field. And Carnell Tate was really, really, really good on the field. And if he goes out and runs a 4.48 instead of a 4.54 40, I don't know that he's necessarily on the board for the Commanders at 7. And for what it's worth, he may not be there now. But you go back and look at, some of his big time plays in college, and you look at the 50+ yard touchdowns that he had against Michigan, against Minnesota, against Wisconsin, and he's burning DBs down the field and making big time catches, in tight windows. And as much as folks want to say, oh well, he needs more separation. Like in the NFL, there's not going to necessarily be that separation, and you've got to be able to make those contested catches. And we've seen that with Terry McLaurin over the years. I think Carnell Tate can be, a similar type player, potentially even better, because you see him do everything on the field. You see him beat DBs downfield. You see him run these precise routes. You see him catch balls in space and in contested situations. I just think he's going to be a really, really good NFL player. And it obviously will depend on the situation that he ends up in. If he ends up in Washington, I'll feel confident about this. But I think he's going to be your offensive player of the year next season in the NFL.
I'm with you. I really like Carnell Tate. He's my favorite wide receiver. I've said multiple times for, 2 months that if they end up taking an offensive player at 7, I'd rather it be Tate than Love. My question to you in follow-up is, do you like Tate at 7 because he's a possibility at 7 more than every, or do you just like him more than every other player in the draft? And if they were picking at 3, you'd want them to take Tate.
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't expect Arvell Reese or David Bailey to be there, right. But if either of those two are there, I like them both more than Tate.
Right.
I guess I like him most because I think he's going to be there at 7. But I think there are better players in the draft. They're just not going to necessarily have a shot at either of those. Jeremiah Love, obviously, is the big name that everyone loves, no pun intended. But I think you have to look at a little bit of the roster construction and have that play into, what you're dealing with here. And, maybe I'm too high on Bill Merritt, but I thought he had a really productive rookie season, particularly, with the chaos that the offense, ran into last year. And to give him an opportunity to play a full, hopefully, 17 games with Jaden Daniels, I think that you have an opportunity that you have a guy who's on a 7th-round pick rookie deal who can give you really good production and, potentially for this year, next year, and beyond. You look at the wide receiver room, and outside of Terry, there are guys that you hope are going to be better. There are guys that you hope can be good, but there's no real future there in that room, except for if they bring back Terry on his, $30+ million price tag, which will be, not next season, but 2 seasons from now. So I think there's a little bit of a balance of, finding the best player, but also finding the best player that fits what your roster construction needs, not just for this year, but for, years in the future as well.
Talking with Mitch Tischler, so I've asked this question before, and I've given my answer to it, but I'm not going to give it to you right now. Max has given his answer to it. So what's your answer to the following, which is, what players could be there at 7 that you're absolutely taking rather than accepting a decent opportunity to trade back and pick up more picks?
I think the first question has to be, where are you trading back to? If you're trading back to 9, there's a number of players that.
Let's just call it something that's attractive. All right. And let's just say 11 or further. Okay. That's fair. Because a trade back to 2 isn't going to, 2 spots isn't going to land you a second. It's going to land you maybe another third, not even a second. So let's just say to Miami or further back. That's available for you. Who are you not doing it for?
There are 4 players I think I'm not doing that for. The 2 I mentioned, Arvell Reese, David Bailey, the other one, Carnell Tate, and the 4th one is Reuben Bain. Those are kind of the 4 guys that, if 1 or 2 of those 4 are there, I'm sticking and making the pick. If by chance those 4 are gone, which certainly is a possibility, it seems like Bain should be there. But then I'd be more interested in a potential trade back. To me, there's, about 10 or 12 players in this draft who I think could all could fall anywhere in that range of kind of 2 to 12. So there's a little bit of flexibility in terms of where you look and, where they end up going. So you're still going to get a good player if you end up at 9, 10, 11, maybe even 12. But if you start pushing further back from that, I think there's kind of a tier that drops after that point. And adding a 2nd-round pick, if they're able to get one, certainly is attractive. But they need top-end talent, and I think you got to stay kind of in that first 10 to 12 picks to find somebody there.
Yeah, for me, it's Bailey and Bain. And I love Tate. Don't get me wrong. I love him a lot. But if there was an opportunity to trade back, I think I'd do it off him. I haven't even considered Reese. And maybe Reese is the one along with Mendoza that I think are the two that definitely there's like no chance they make it to 7. I've actually seen Bailey mocked to Washington at 7. So I'll keep him in the mix of what's possible. But I don't think Reese is possible. We know Mendoza isn't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Reese is going to go 2 or 3, and all the smoke about the Cardinals liking Jeremiah Love, certainly I'm sure they like him, but if Arvell Reese is there, I think they run to the podium and take him there. There's, the lack of quarterbacks in this draft makes things super interesting because, you have guys who are being pushed up the draft board, who are talented players and have all the stats and numbers and stuff that you'd like, but aren't necessarily the premium position type guys. And it's going to be interesting to see how teams kind of approach this draft with, Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs and guys like that who play positions that aren't premium positions in the NFL.
Who do you think they'll end up taking at 7 if they stay there and take a player?
I do think Carnell Tate. Maybe it's my bias because I've been so high on him for a few months now, but I think that he's a player that can do everything for you and can step right in and be a big piece of an offense. And I think that if you're building this team around Jaden Daniels, which they've talked about in the past, and obviously things are changing with the coordinators that are there. You look at the offseason, they spent the lion's share of their money and signings on, defensive players, particularly guys, kind of in that front 7. I think that it makes the most sense that they add another dynamic weapon for Jaden, another dynamic weapon to this offense, and Carnell Tate fits the bill.
I think it's a good possibility as well, and it wouldn't disappoint me at all. I love the player like you do. I said to Max earlier, Mitch, that I think more than any other player in this draft, the one move that would anger the fan base the most is if Jeremiah Love is on the board at 7 and they don't take Jeremiah Love. Now, I actually went through the players. Like, I think take Bailey and Reese and obviously Mendoza out of the equation and put everybody else into it. The one that would really, I think, piss off the fan base more than any other is the player you and I both like. And I would take Tate over Love personally for a number of reasons. But do you agree with me that if Love is there and they don't take Love, that's the one thing they could do in the first round, pass on Love, that would create the most negative response among our fan base?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think it won't just be the Commanders fan base. It'll be the other teams in front of them. It'll be the Browns. It'll probably be the Giants. These different fan bases, I think, he's the guy that social media has fallen in love with. And that's not to say that he's not a very, very good player and has a bright future in the NFL. Like, don't get me wrong. I think he's going to be good, maybe very good. I just don't think that he necessarily fits what Washington needs offensively. But that's also part of, the job that Adam Peters has. And you're not necessarily to take the popular pick, but to take the player that they think can help them most. And so, yes, the fan base would be upset, and certainly it would immediately put pressure on, whoever they do take to perform well to alleviate it. Because, you and I both know what'll happen, in week 3, heck, in week 1, if, whoever they take over them, isn't performing and Love goes out there and has a good season.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and typically running backs are ready to roll year 1 more than most other positions. I'm with you. It sounds like you and I are actually on the same page, and I have not found anybody really that's been on the same page with me on Love. I like the player. I don't consider him to be the transcendent elite level, Bijan, Saquon, McCaffrey type of back. And for that position, I'm only taking Bijan Robinson at number 7. And I don't consider him to be that player. It sounds like you agree.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, I also think running back is a position that you can find in the mid-levels of a draft, or you can find productive players in free agency as well. I mean, you look back at Ashton Genty last year, he was the transcendent running back, and granted, he went to a terrible organization that, has a really bad team, but he was good. He was fine last year. I don't think folks would necessarily call him transcendent. And coming out of college, that was kind of the idea, was that he was going to step in and, be a 1,000-yard back year after year and be able to do all these different things. The other thing about Jeremiah Love that I guess just doesn't really get talked about a lot is his frame and his size. He's not the biggest body. He's not the biggest guy.
Right.
How is he going to, granted, Notre Dame plays a full college football schedule for the most part. And, they play a bunch of, big time colleges, but how's he going to hold up over a 17 game season? How's he going to hold up as a 15, 20 touch a game, type of guy? That's the question that I have about him. That's the biggest question, which, is in the grand scheme of things, not the worst thing in the world. But I think this team has a running back on a 7th round rookie deal who can be a very, very productive back right now. And, maybe you get to a point where you realize Bill isn't the guy, and, you have next year's draft, 2 years, 3 years, whatever time frame it is, to go find another running back. I don't think that Jeremiah Love is this guy that you have to take if he's there on the board.
Look, Notre Dame, I've pointed this out several times. Notre Dame has, obviously a schedule, but my God, after Miami and Texas A&M in weeks 1 and 2 last year, they played some of the worst defensive teams in the country last year, and the holes were gaping. I've comped him to Josh Jacobs with just more speed, which, by the way, is an excellent NFL running back. It's just not Christian McCaffrey or Bijan Robinson. If he ended up being Josh Jacobs with just more home run speed, I mean, I'd be thrilled to see it. I just think it's too high at 7.
Yeah, and I don't want to downgrade the kid too much, but you look at some of his games in there against teams with pretty awful defenses. He had 50 some odd yards on I think 15 or so carries against Arkansas. He had not a big performance at the end of the year. When they played Stanford, you see a couple of he
got hurt in that game, the Syracuse game. I mean, go back and look at some of those runs against that defense. I mean, gaping holes where he wasn't touched. Once he got 5, 6, 7 yards past the line of scrimmage, it was But he's good. He's really good.
4-4. Yeah, he's a 4-3 guy. So he has the speed, he has the explosiveness. I just don't think those holes are going to exist in the NFL when he gets up here, and I think that changes the calculation on it a whole bunch when you take away, his ability to run through, 5, 6 yard holes like he did in college from time to time.
Talking with Mitch Tischler. So give me the player that you hope is there at 71. Let's assume it's Tate at 7, and you get your wish. You've looked at this draft. Who falls to 71 that you'd be really excited about? Give me some of those players on night 2 that you really like.
Yeah, Keontae Scott, he's a DB from Miami, is somebody who's been on my board when we made when we did our Commanders only mock draft on Beltway football. That's what I took. He's a 25-year-old kid, so he's certainly not young, but you have 4 years of control of him. I like the idea that you have a Meek Robertson there who can be, especially early in the season, kind of your every down, nickel / slot corner. I think Keontae Scott's someone who can build up into that role. He's also a really good off-ball blitzer, which I think we're going to see a whole lot of with Durante Jones. I initially had Jagger Burton, who's a center from Kentucky, a little bit further in the draft, but I do think they need to take a center in one of those next 2 picks. It seems like he's rushing up the board as someone who might, push into the 2nd round there. Maybe it's a little bit early for him, but I also think you've seen this front office, kind of have their convictions on their players and go take them. We saw that last year with Josh Connerly. So, maybe as somebody who they think can step in and help kind of early on in his career. He was a center at Kentucky. They ran a zone read, a zone run game. So he's familiar with kind of what the Commanders are going to be asking for him. Obviously played in the SEC. So, played against big time competition. I keep going back to, and I said it early on when we were talking about Carnell Tate, is just, not forgetting what these guys put on tape when they're on the field and getting distracted by, metrics and numbers that have since come out, because you have, for most of these guys, a year, 2 years, 3 years, some 4 years, of on-field play where you can kind of evaluate who they are, and to not get distracted by the shiny fast thing, as you're going through it, I think is important. But those are kind of two of the guys that I earmarked as folks I'd love to see in the burgundy and gold.
Yeah, to me, the player that speaks to that more than any other, and you've already mentioned him, is Bane. I can't speak to how he overcomes the short arms, but power, speed, technique, and just, motor seem to work against some pretty good, NFL caliber offensive linemen. And if I can't imagine that the tape that people are going to go with the short arms over the tape, because he can't keep your eyes off watching him kind of a player, especially this year and in their biggest games. He was dominant. I don't know how he ends up falling, but that short arm number is going to scare a lot of teams off. I think if his arms, Mitch, had come in at like normal sized, he is potentially the number 2 player in this draft.
Yeah, I think the thing that doesn't get talked about with Ruben Bane enough is that Miami couldn't keep him off the field. He was on the field on first, second, third, fourth. Yeah. He was on the field in every situation. And so, you look at guys, at some of the other guys like Arvell Reese, and even David Bailey, and they're more, passed down, hoping that they are passed down effective, hoping they're better at getting after the quarterback. Ruben Bane is a 3-down defensive end edge rusher, whatever you want to call him. And, as much as you talk about not having 3-down backs in the NFL much anymore, you don't have a whole lot of 3-down, edge guys either. And for Ruben Bane, who did it at the highest level in the biggest moments against the best teams, I think you can't forget, what you saw, the dominance that you saw all through the college football playoff in the national championship game, week after week from him. And that's why he's, he and Cardell Tate are the 2 guys that I'm running to the podium for. And it's just whether the team kind of balance of how Adam Peters wants to look at it, whether they want to add on offense or defense.
Yeah, like Bane, Bailey, Tate, like if you're just going on production, and Mendoza, obviously. Real quickly, though, with Bane, here's the one thing that it's not that I'm struggling with it, because they'd figure out an answer, but he really does strike me, unlike Bailey, unlike Reese, as a 4-3 defensive end, 3-point stance D end, rather than a 2-point stance base 3-4. And if we assume that Durante Jones is going to take Brian Flores' base 3-4, which they actually played more base than a lot of teams in the league, is that the right positional fit for Bane?
Certainly that's a question. I think what we're going to see out of Durante Jones is he's going to put these guys in the best position possible, which every defensive-minded coach wants to do. But I've talked about this for a long time with offensive coordinators around the league. You have guys who say, hey, my system is great, run my system. If you do it as I say, doesn't matter who you put where, you'll find yourself open. I think Durante Jones is going to be more about putting guys in the best positions they can be in to win with their skill sets. And I think with a guy like Bane, there are a lot of different things that you can do with him. And even if they're running a base 3-4, you're going to have your hand in your dirt defensive end guy, who's going to be on in the 5 gap on the outside out there. And right. I think Bane is somebody who is going to be, from his rookie year on the field, every play, and kind of the tenacity with which he plays the game. Even when he doesn't win, he always is up. He's always around the ball. He's always chasing after it. You look at some of the sacks that he had, particularly in the college football playoff. It's not that he won right away, but he kept after the play and was able to impact it. And ultimately, in the first round at 7, that's what you want, is someone who's going to impact the game. And I think Bane is somebody that can definitely do that.
All right. I haven't talked to you, I don't think, since free agency. So overall, what did you think in terms of what they added?
I was really pleased. With their free agency. Heading into it, I wanted to see them, spend 80-90% of their moves on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah. I wanted to see them go after. In my mind, I had kind of 3 of the top edge rushers, and they got 2 of them with Owe and Chason. I think some of the deals are really smart and sensible, which the team had a ton of money to spend, but they didn't go out and, blow the bank and overpay people like we've seen, former Burgundy and Gold GM/owners do. So I really like it. One of the biggest additions that I love is Chigakonkwo. I mean, I'm a Maryland guy.
Yeah.
I loved him when he played here. But I think he can be a real threat in the middle of the field, and it's something that this team hasn't really had since Jordan Reed was here. Zach Ertz is really good tight end, but he didn't give you a whole lot of after the catch. He just was really good about getting open and using his body to make catches. I think Chig is someone who can thread a defense on all three levels and can go out and be a threat in the middle and also deep, and somebody that safeties are going to have to watch, which ultimately only helps Terry McLaurin, ultimately helps Jaden Daniels, helps this offense as a whole. I think he's going to be a really nice addition. I think he's kind of flying under the radar as far as fans are looking at the offseason moves.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on him. Loved him. I'm a Terp too, and he was one of my favorite players heading into free agency. And I've thought a lot about this recently, and I'll just bounce it off you because I don't think I've talked a lot about it. I think we may be sleeping on Rachaad White. And I know you like Krosky Merritt, and I do too, and certainly that run against the Cowboys on Christmas Day where he finally sort of got through that second and third level and turned it into a big play really was encouraging to see that. But I've always liked Rachaad White. I've always thought he's been sort of underrated as a between the tackles runner. He catches the ball, and he's a veteran that really knows how to handle pass pro from that position. I have a feeling he's going to be a much more significant player, even at the start of the season, than maybe most are thinking. You say what to that?
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. I think when you look at Bill Merritt, his biggest flaw was in pass pro, and that's something that Rachaad White shores up. He's one of the best pass blocking running backs, in the NFL. And honestly, if you want to go back to Jordan Love, I think that Jeremiah Love, I think he's somebody who struggles a little bit in pass pro as well. So as much as you talk about him being a third down back there, but I think Rachaad White has a big role in this offense. And as much as I like Bill, I don't think he's going to be, your three down horse. He's going to go out and command every carry, every play. Yeah. And having Rachaad White, having that veteran experience behind him is going to help out a lot. Not to mention, obviously, the relationship he has with Jaden and, the excitement that he seems to have to be playing in Washington, playing with, his buddy from college.
All right, two more. Number one, what do you think happened with Tyler Biadasz in the center position?
I got to be honest, it's an odd situation. It's my biggest gripe about the offseason and what they've done. I think the kind of double talk and what we heard from Dan Quinn and then Adam Peters about the situation was them kind of trying to protect the image of Biadasz, trying to protect Biadasz a little bit. I'm sure that they tried to move him and teams told him they weren't going to trade for him. The move on from him though is interesting and honestly a little bit odd because as much as I like Nick Allegretti and think he, maybe he can step in and do a good job. As you talk about, the change of this offense and Jaden Daniels being under center more, it almost highlights the importance of that center position and, the relationship between, center and quarterback there. Yeah. Biadasz, had money on his deal. Just because he's in the last year of his deal with no guaranteed money doesn't mean you have to, sign him to a new deal a la Daron Payne, as you look at it. It seemed quick to move on from him. So you just hope that they have a backup plan in mind because honestly, Allegretti is really the only center, that's on your roster right now. And that's something that's obviously got to change as they go through training camp. But Nick Allegretti isn't a good enough player that demands that there's no competition there. And he's, kind of handed the ball, which is why I talk about Jagger Burton and maybe going center in the third round there because that's somebody that's somewhere that they need to add another usable player, not just somebody who can snap the football per se.
If they don't draft Carnell Tate or Jordan Tyson or in a trade back Denzel Boston or, Omar Cooper Jr., or they don't get a receiver, they don't get a starting quality, quality starting receiver in this draft, how do they solve that problem between now and opening day? Is it Ayuk, and would you be okay with that?
I think you you have to hope that it's Ayuk. I mean, can they go into the season with what they have? Sure. I mean, could the combination of Treylon Burks, De'Ami Brown, Van Jefferson, kind of that group put together a decent, second wide receiver option? Sure. But if they don't end up with a receiver, I think you have to very, very closely look at the Ayuk situation. We've kind of gotten to a point where I'm kind of out on talking about Ayuk until he becomes available. But I think there's a lot of questions that come with that. A, how are you getting him? Because I don't want to give up any sort of draft capital to go get him. And B, how do you structure a contract for Brandon that's going to make sense? I mean, no one wants to pay him, big money, obviously, but he's going to want some incentives. How do you incentivize him? If it's yards, catches, touchdowns, and you get a couple games into the season, he's not getting the looks that he wants. Are you going to have, the malcontent Ayuk again, not wanting to be a big part of it? And then obviously, you're back to square one at receiver. So I'm certainly interested in it. But to me, when Ayuk becomes available, I'm offering him a contract. Here's the number, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever the number is, million. Sign it, don't sign it, but I'm not letting you shop it around because you either want to be with us or you don't. And if you don't, put your fist on the table and say, I want to be a commander, then I don't want you in the burgundy and gold.
Thanks, Mitch. As always, good job. Appreciate it. Enjoy Thursday night and the weekend.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. You too.
All right. So if you believe that adding another playmaker is a priority for you and that Adam Peters agrees it's a priority for the team to add another offensive playmaker, I'm giving you your choice of who that offensive playmaker is. It can be a player in the draft, in the first round, third round. It can be Brandon Ayuk. It can be Stephon Diggs. It can be Jawan Jennings, although not necessarily the playmaker type. But you get your choice of the playmaker that Adam Peters identifies and gets to add to this offense. Who do you want that to be? 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. from my friend Nick, who writes, why didn't you mention John Allen in Cincinnati when you were talking about Dexter Lawrence? Well, Nick, I had forgotten that John Allen had signed with the Cincinnati Bengals. Totally forgotten that fact. But I should have been reminded of it because when we were reading through the Dexter Lawrence double team information over the last 4 years, Dexter Lawrence was the most double teamed interior defensive lineman of the last 4 years. On that list was John Allen on the top 5 list. I think he was 5th. John Allen had an okay season in Minnesota. They were way over the salary cap and just couldn't keep him for another season and moved on. So Cincinnati has, in addition to Dexter Lawrence, they've got John Allen, who will play side by side with Dexter Lawrence. And remember, they added Boye Mafe from Seattle as an edge rusher. Of course, they lost Trey Hendrickson. That's going to be a very interesting division, the AFC North. Always is. Pittsburgh won it last year. Baltimore will certainly be the favorite again. But Cincinnati, if they're healthy on offense, the key, I mean, they didn't have their quarterback enough last year, but Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown, etc. With Joe Burrow, they should certainly be, a 9-10 win team. If the defense improves at all, they could be a real threat. All right, 301-230-0980. The question is, I think we all agree that another playmaker will help out the offense and help out Jaden Daniels. And I'm talking about an offensive playmaker. Look, I think adding to the defense, which they did in free agency, and maybe they'll do again this upcoming weekend, and going from, without question, at the end of the year, the worst defense in the NFL, one of the worst in my recent memory of watching this team, to something approaching the middle of the pack, that will help out the offense as much as another playmaker will. Seriously, do the math on that. The other playmaker is going to be brand new, could be young, could take some time, but a defense that hands the ball over to you after a stop, which didn't happen much last year, in good field position, which didn't happen much last year, after a turnover in excellent field position, plus territory, and maybe even after a defensive score, that would help out the offense more than anything else. You've got to turn this turnover margin thing around. You've got to get takeaways. You've got to get more stops on third down. You've got to force teams to punt more often. And that'll help out the offense a lot. But I think we all agree that adding another playmaker to the offense, to De'Ami Brown and Van Jefferson and Chigakonkwo and whatever they do in the draft, but adding another offensive playmaker is a priority. So I'm giving you the opportunity to name that one more playmaker that gets added to the offense. Who would you want it to be? 301-230-0980. Let me just say something that I'm asking for one, but I believe that even if they were to draft a Jeremiah Love or even a Carnell Tate, take a receiver, I don't think Brandon Ayuk's out of the equation. I think they might add 2. I think it could be Tate and Ayuk. It could be Tate and maybe if Jennings' price comes down, Jennings. Now, Jennings and Ayuk are different players. Diggs is still out there. Tyreek Hill's still out there. For me, the answer with one player, it would be Tate. Again, there are only 2 players I wouldn't trade back off of, Bailey and Bain. But if it comes down to them adding one playmaker in this offseason to the offense to what they have now, and they did add with Chig, they added with certainly bringing De'Ami back and Van Jefferson and Rashad White and Jeremy Ford, but it would be Tate. I think he's the best receiver in the draft. I really think that he is exceptional. If you watch him at Ohio State, he gets separation. He is such a great route runner. His route running actually reminds me of Justin Jefferson in many ways. That's a ridiculous comp because Jefferson is already all-time great as a route runner, but he doesn't drop anything. He's a hands catcher, and he's an elite level catcher of the football. I mean, putting him on the other side opposite Terry with Chigakonkwo on the field and maybe a home run threat in the backfield like Bill, along with a steady Eddie like Rashad White, I like it. Tate would be my number one if you told me they added one playmaker and one only to the roster between now and opening day. Max, who's yours?
Honestly, as we were talking about it, like, I've been a Jeremiah Love guy, and after, I mean, we've talked about Carnell Tate a lot today, and I've been thinking about him and how he would help this offense. I honestly got to back you here, because if you really break down just like the depth at each position, I think wide receiver is probably the weakest where we are playmaker wise. And Carnell Tate is that. Tall, can go get it, incredible route runner, smooth, learning from Terry, another Ohio State guy. I do think that Carnell Tate would probably be my answer here as well.
I can't believe that's your answer.
Playmaker wise?
I was convinced it was going to be Jeremiah Love. I'm convinced that Love's going to be the overwhelming answer to this question.
I would love for Jeremiah Love to be the addition, but when I'm talking about, like, when I mentioned depth, we've got Bill, we've got Rashad White. I would like to add the third into that mix, but at the same time,
okay, yeah, the wide receiver need
wide receivers big,
objectively greater right now than running back.
Yeah,
but by the way, that's a lot of faith in Krosky Merritt.
It is big time.
That you're putting, because
that he's able to learn.
No doubt that Jeremiah Love would be the best running back in the running back room if they drafted him. It wouldn't even be close.
Yeah.
All right. So you and I pick the same guy. Tate, phone lines are open. 301-230-0980. Let's start with, who is this? Lep? Lep, go ahead.
Lap.
It's Lap. You spelled it wrong. Lap. My guy Lap.
Oh, man, Kevin. I've been calling for years, man.
Yeah, but he just put it in there. I'm like, who's Lap?
That's on me.
Yeah. I just changed it in there. I got the correct spelling now.
Who
you got, Lap? One offensive playmaker added between now and opening day. Who do you want it to be?
I'm going Tate. I've been saying Tate for the longest. I know Doc been, getting me sold on Jeremiah Love, but I've been saying Tate. And I'm agreeing with you, Kevin. We probably can still add, Brandon Ayuk too as well. But I just think we need a young receiver to eventually probably push Terry, replace Terry, push some of these other young receivers we got, even De'Army. Like, it ain't sweet. You coming back here, bro. Like, you got to come and ball out. So this young guy can really push it and make plays. He got short hands, like you said, Kevin. And I think I've been wanting, Jaden to have a young playmaker that he can have chemistry. That's why I like the tight end that we got in the offseason. I was really happy we got him. So this receiver, we can get a young receiver. Jaden needs somebody he can build with. Terry is nice, but Terry's getting old. It's not, Terry's fault. He didn't have a quarterback for years, but Jaden needs a young guy that he can build chemistry with, and be consistent with and grow with. So
thanks, Lap.
I'm excited,
Appreciate
and I hope that's the pick. Hopefully he's not there. Hopefully he's about.
Appreciate it. From my buddy John. John writes, just texted me. He said, "I'm surprised you haven't comped Tate to Ayuk. There are similarities between Tate and Ayuk. Tate's bigger though, right? Tate's probably bigger than Ayuk." Taller, anyway. What's Ayuk listed at? Give me Ayuk's 6 feet? Yeah, so Tate's 6'2", 6'3", right? What was his actual measurement at Indy?
Tankathon says 6'2.5".
6'2.5". Yeah, so he is taller. But you know what? From a route running standpoint, from a hand standpoint, there are some similarities. From a working any part of the field standpoint, there are some similarities, John. There are. Stay on hold. Skip, Chad, Kev, PJ, TC, got a phone line open. You get to add one offensive playmaker to our roster between now and opening day. It could come in the draft. It could come in the form of Ayuk or Stephon Diggs or somebody else. Who's that? It could be a running back. It could be a tight end, by the way. You may say, and you're allowed to, actually, I want the starting center, although that's not really a playmaker. But give me the one playmaker you would add between now and opening day. They're going to add another playmaker between now and opening day. I think it comes this weekend and then may come again in August with Ayuk. But you only get one choice. Mine is Tate. Max agrees with me. Your calls on this next. All right. Calls. Give me the one playmaker you would add. You hope they add between now and opening day. It could come this weekend. It could come after this weekend. Obviously, Brandon Ayuk is the answer to the it doesn't come this weekend. And some of you may prefer that because it would be certainly an unknown from a mental standpoint. But if he's physically right, you're getting a player that you know can play at a very high level and could really elevate this team if he's the Brandon Ayuk from 2023. 301-230-0980. You get one offensive playmaker to add. Who is it? For me, I would take Carnell Tate. I'm a big fan of Carnell Tate. I love his route running ability. I love his size. I love his hands. Everything about him speaks to, a number one receiver, even if he doesn't start off that way in an offense. Skip, go ahead.
Kevin, you and Max make a good point about the need for a receiver. However, I think you do underestimate Jeremiah Love. He is not a Josh Jacobs. Jacobs is bigger, and Jacobs ran a 4.64 40.
I've said that he's a faster version of Josh Jacobs. Meaning that I think he's going to be a really, really good back because Josh Jacobs, even without the Jeremiah Love speed, is a good back.
And he does catch the ball, too. And that's where Jeremiah Love has the X factor as a receiver. They can, be prominent in the passing game. And also, what's very fascinating about our general manager is his looking at the RAS score. And
right.
I've been really looking at these RAS scores. By the way, you know who has one of the highest RAS scores on the entire team? Terry McLaurin has a 9.6 RAS score.
Yeah, but he was very athletic coming out. Yep.
Yes. So that's something to, that I didn't know.
By the way, Josh Jacobs, just so you know, he ran a 4.52 at the combine, not 4.6.
Okay. But
that seemed to be way too high. I think he may actually, his pro day, he ran a 4.6. Combine, though, he ran 4.5 something. Usually it's the opposite. You run faster on your pro day.
Sure.
But anyway, go ahead, Skip.
So you know what his RAS score is? Like a 5.72.
Yeah.
So Jeremiah Love is up there with Bijan as far as RAS score in the 9.4.
You've watched Josh Jacobs play, though, right? Like, how Josh Jacobs, how he's an upper tier, excellent running back.
Sure,
he just doesn't have the home run breakaway speed that Jeremiah Love has. But if Josh Jacobs was your number one back if he were in the running back room, he'd be a guy that you can give the ball to 20 times a game, and he's going to rush for 1,200 plus yards.
Sure, right. Being an athlete isn't everything. It's about being a football player. So
yeah,
I would love to have a Josh Jacobs, but what I'm saying is they're not comparable. Jeremiah Love is more of
they're comparable to me size-wise. They're essentially, Jacobs might be a little bit bigger in terms of
I think he's about 10 pounds
body.
bigger. Yeah.
How many pounds bigger?
10 pounds bigger.
So that makes sense to me, but their running style is more straight ahead, run people over, try to jump over people. You see Josh Jacobs do that a lot. I like Jacobs. I think Jacobs is a really competitive back as well. And Jacobs can catch the football. He's had, 30, 40, 50-yard seasons, hasn't he?
Two different types of backs, though, in my opinion. But
you're focused on RAS score. I see stylistically a similar running style.
Okay,
so we'll just agree to disagree.
Jeremiah Love to Bijan and Christian McCaffrey.
No, not even close, in my opinion. He is not the lateral quickness and vision back that those guys are. That's why the Josh Jacobs comparison for me is more apt, because Jacobs doesn't have that quick change of speed, that hesitation, that dead leg, that between the tackles vision that those guys have. And I don't think Jeremiah Love has it either. That's where I see the single biggest difference isn't body type. It's not capability. It's vision. I don't see him with that elite level vision and the ability to make people miss in close quarters like Bijan, Jameer, McCaffrey, even Saquon. What I do see with him is somebody that if there's a crease, he's gone. If there's somebody in front of him, he can run over or jump over. But I don't see the wiggle. I don't see the vision. He's not at that level for me. That's my opinion.
What about pass catching ability? Just pure being able to catch
he's
the
a
ball.
good pass catcher. He's a great pass catcher. But in space, does he have the same make people miss ability that Bijan has as a pass catcher? No, not in my opinion. McCaffrey does? No. But he's good. He's really good. He's really good. I just don't think really good is number 7 in an NFL draft, given the positional value or lack thereof. But you'd take Love. That would be your one. That'd be your guy.
I think Love is almost as good as Christian McCaffrey. Not as good as Bijan.
I don't. We'll see. You might end up being right. We'll see. I don't. McCaffrey may have been, the year he came out, Cooley said this, the best receiver in his draft. Like if he had been a receiver in college, they may have drafted him as a receiver in the first round. McCaffrey's beyond what we've seen from almost anybody as a pass catcher combined with being a runner. That's lofty praise. You're not the only one giving it, Skip. I'm not saying you're by yourself. You're with a lot of others that believe Love is that at that level, both as a pass catcher and as a runner. I don't. We'll see. Time will tell. I got to get to a break. Kev, Chad, everybody else on hold, stay there. We'll do this for another segment, and then Thorn Nystrom, draft analyst, one of my favorite with his top 500 big board, will jump on with us. All right, you get one offensive playmaker between now and opening day to add to the roster. It can come this weekend. It can come Thursday night or Friday night or Saturday. Saturday's a reach. I want a playmaker that you know is going to be immediately a part of the mix for 2026. It could come after the draft in the form of Stephon Diggs. He's still out there. Why haven't we talked more about Diggs? He'd be a good fit for this offense opposite Terry. Obviously, Brandon Ayuk is lurking. See what happens post June 1 with that. There's no one that is not in their right mind that's going to trade for him and take on that contract. You get one playmaker to add between now and opening day. Who is it? For me, it's Tate. I'd love to see Tate. I'd love to see like a trade back even just a couple of spots and Tate still be there at 9. I doubt that'll happen. He's not my number one player. This is just specific to this conversation of adding an offensive playmaker. I would love to see David Bailey fall to 7 and give us maybe one of the next great pass rushers in the league. I would love Reuben Bain to be the pick if he were there at 7. And I certainly wouldn't, be upset if it were Sonny Styles or Caleb Downs or even Jeremiah Love. I mean, I wouldn't be thrilled with it if a trade back was available to them. But if Styles is gone, if Bailey is gone, if Bain is gone, if Tate is gone, yeah, I mean, and they end up taking Love, although at that point I might prefer Delane. Or maybe, Tyson's got the injury stuff bothers me. But we're specifically not talking about who you hope they take on Thursday night. It is you get one offensive playmaker to add to this roster between now and opening day. Available, obviously, through the draft or not signed by another team right now. Who is it? For me, it's Tate. For Max, it's Tate. Let's go to Chad in Nashville. Chad, go ahead.
What's up, Kev? Long time no talk. I will say I want Brandon Ayuk, and I wouldn't say I guess necessarily want, but if it had to be between drafting and getting either him or I guess I should say Stephon Diggs, I would go with him. I think if you're a betting man, you already know he's probably going to be on this roster before the season starts. I mean, he's going to be a post-June release. And you don't throw away millions of dollars because you just want to play football with your buddy and then not go play football with your buddy, if that makes sense.
I don't know if that's when he was throwing away the $35 million. I don't know if that's necessarily what was on his mind.
No, but I mean, no, it wasn't. The moment, what was on his mind?
In the moment, I think that Washington and reuniting with Jaden Daniels is on his mind. What was on his mind during those months of not reporting to the 49ers is a question you've got to get answered because it could speak to horrible judgment or even mental instability. So you got to get those things, rectified.
Yes, you do. But I want to say as far as draft, and this is why I say if there is one, it would be Tate. But if Tate's there, I've already said that here, like in Tennessee, he's going to end up taking Love if he's not taking that 3. I know it's around here, it's like 50-50. They do want defense, but they're going to take Love to take some off of Cam. Love will not be there at 7. If Tate's there at 7, I still feel like you have an opportunity to add a second-round pick for someone who wants that receiver to jump up to 7.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
And I said it months ago, I want them to draft defense. You only have a certain amount of picks. So if you don't add any, we need younger, better defense. Look at Seattle. I'm not saying we have the same weapons as Seattle, but our weapons right now are comparable at the least from what they were in 2024. Okay, if not, you could say a little bit better at the time.
I don't know about that.
Running back.
Right now, your weapons offensively compared to 2024 are basically comparable. You don't have a slot receiver right now that you know of, and your tight end might be better, but Ertz had a good 24. Eckler's not part of the backfield. Eckler was dynamic when he was on the field for them in 2024.
You said it's at least comparable.
Yeah, it's comparable, but it's not better.
Okay. If that's the case, if it's not better, Jaden Daniels elevates whoever's around him. I think the whole anonymous GM comment about that they were, panicky or whatever, but Jaden Daniels could save it. That just clearly tells me that you can pick up a Stephon Diggs, you could get a Brandon Ayuk, and go ahead and just draft defense.
Yeah, no. Your thought process, Chad, makes a lot of sense. Like what you're saying is you want that playmaker to be not, Brandon Ayuk, or just we'll take Brandon Ayuk, because you don't want them to take that playmaker in the first round or even the third round of the draft. You want more defense. I get that. Thanks. Appreciate it. Not to mention the fact that for next year and maybe even the year after and the year after that, Ayuk could end up becoming a star again. And certainly from a talent and an NFL production standpoint, he's got a lot more on tape than Carnell Tate or Jordan Tyson or Jeremiah Love have. Let's go to Kevin in Arlington. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. And just real quick, if you were asking me what's the defensive playmaker you're going to take, I want a green dot guy, okay? So I either want Styles or Downs. But that's not the question. But to me, I don't know who wears the green dot on defense right now. So consider that. Now, on offense, unless you want to respond to that.
No, I would say right now, the leading candidate would probably be Jordan McGee, but we've talked about Will Harris potentially being that guy. It's a missing, it could be Chenal. It's a missing piece right now. Styles would be, look, I'm not going to complain about Styles. Everything about him reeks of Peters and Quinn. High character, high intelligence, high off the charts all-time RAS score, and a major need, added to that. So, you add Sonny Styles. Here's the thing, though, Kev. They can't. If you add Styles, I hope he's ready to go this year, like at a high level, at a ready level to where to be that coach on the field communicating with Durante Jones. But go ahead. The offensive playmaker for you would be who?
So at least I'm coming around to the idea of Tate. The more I hear different comps, I've heard an AJ Green of the Bengals comp. I've heard that Love and Tate are similar to Gibbs and St. Brown with the Lions. And consider how potent that Lions offense was with a Jared Goff who can't run. Okay. But that's actually what made my decision for me is the quarterback and running the ball. I feel like if we have a bell cow back, that being Love, we are going to feed him the rock a hell of a lot. And we should. And I'm listening to you because if his vision isn't what it needs to be, and if he doesn't have the wiggle, then you're right. If your scouting report is right, I wouldn't take him. But I've heard too many other scouting reports that suggest otherwise.
He's really good, Kev. He's not just a straight line guy. Let me be clear on that. But when I hear him compared to truly somebody who is truly unique right now in the NFL, Bijan Robinson running style, vision-wise, make people miss-wise, is totally unique. He's not that. He just isn't. But I don't know who is. There aren't many people in the history of the league that have had that ability that he has. Bijan is truly one of the most gifted running backs this league has ever seen. And they haven't been to a playoff game. That's the other thing about this position. It's not just the contractual lack of value that you get out of it. It's the fact that that position rarely leads a team to playoff wins, plural.
Well, I hear you. And I do go back to 2024 when Eckler wasn't concussed. And that was a dynamic part of the offense. I'm hopeful about Bill. I think White is a nice change of pace, as McNichols is particularly on passing downs with their ability to block and catch. But Love is a special talent. And Kevin, to me, it comes down to, I want Jaden throwing, not running. I think he's very brittle. I think we got lucky in his rookie year. This is the NFL. I don't want him exposed to as many hits as he's been exposed to.
I hear you.
That's where I'm at with
I
it.
don't
And
want
that's
them to
why
take
That's
away.
why I would pick
I
Goff.
I don't
That's
want
why.
them to take away that threat. It's just too important in today's NFL. But I would love it to be mixed with a 13, 14, 1,500 yard back, which, by the way, Love may end up being. He's that talented. I just don't think it's worth 7. That's all. I'm nauseating with my repetition on Love. All right, those of you that I didn't get to, I apologize. We got to get to our next guest, Thorn Nystrom, who is one really interesting draft analyst. He's been doing this top 500 big board with pro comps for years. He'll join me when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. Don't forget, you can watch us on the Team 980's YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button and the like button when you get there. All right, joining me right now is one of my favorites this time of year. Thor Nystrom is a draft expert. He's an NFL guy. He does a lot of work with the guys at Score North in Minneapolis. He's a Vikings fan, but he puts out every year in advance of the NFL draft, he puts out his top 500 big board. Top 500 big board, and he does something that I've always enjoyed. He does something that not everybody likes to do for some reason. He'll give you a pro comp, past, present, somebody that this player reminds him of. I think that makes it easier for a lot of certainly casual NFL draft fans. Thor joins us right now. Are you ready for this? How you doing?
Oh man, I'm ready, Kevin. Thank you for that kind intro. But yeah, couldn't be more ready. We spent a couple months getting to this point and talked through every single scenario. And you always look forward to the moment when all 32 players at the poker table have to turn over their cards, and that's what's going to happen this weekend.
All right, I'm going to start with the question that many times I end with, and that is, who's the player on the board, on your big board, that you're most excited about being right about? Like, you are super confident that you have valued this player in a way that most aren't, and you feel like you're going to be right.
At the very we could do it a couple, but at the very top of the board, that would be Ruben Bain Jr. He's been my number 2 player overall from the get. Number 1 non-quarterback. I think he's the most dominant player in this class, and he's gotten nitpicked for a bunch of things, and there's a thought of he could fall out of the top 10. I think that's absurd. And if he falls out of the top 5, any team that gets him, in my opinion, you're getting an absolute steal. So I would say Ruben Bain there at the top of the board.
Give me somebody post round 1 that you feel confident you're going to be right about.
I would say I'll toss out 2 small school guys that I believe are probably going to go on day 2, but one on each side of the ball. Ted Hurst from Georgia State.
Yeah.
I am very confident that guy is going to be a difference maker at the next level and could be a star receiver at the next level. If Ted Hurst had played at Georgia as opposed to Georgia State, or if he played at Alabama or played some of these different things at Oklahoma last season, I think he'd be going higher in the draft than he's ultimately going to go. I think you're going to get him at a value discount because of that. On my board, he's a late second-round pick. He's now, after his quote-unquote rise during the pre-draft process, now being discussed as a potential third-round pick. But I think it's a second-round value that's probably going to go in round 3. Then the other one that I would toss out, I love this kid's game. Caleb Proctor from Southeast Louisiana, an interior defensive lineman. He reminds me a lot of a player that we get to see here locally, coming to you from Minneapolis, in Jalen Redmond.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb Proctor, 6'2", 295 pounds, and he plays a really unorthodox game where he lines up kind of askance and thin. He's not wide. The stance is very narrow, and then he just shoots off the line at the snap and is looking to crash gaps. And he can withstand direct shots like on his side, keep the balance, keep coming forward, which is the thing that allows him to sort of be skinny and angled at the snap. It's really difficult to keep that guy out of the backfield. He is just so active. The havoc stats and everything like that. And you can say, well, it was just Southeast Louisiana, these guys he was dominating. He also did it to LSU. So that's the tape to turn on for him, going up, beating NFL offensive linemen. But I really, really like Caleb Proctor's game in an interior defensive line class where it's possible we don't have a first rounder. Caleb Proctor is a big-time day 2 sleeper in that class that could ultimately become one of the best interior defensive linemen out of this class.
All right. Washington selecting at number 7 overall. Are you a believer that this draft is very light with blue chip, sort of transcendent kinds of talents?
I am, yes.
So what would you do at 7? Who are the players that you would absolutely stay there and take versus entertaining a trade back opportunity? Are there any?
Yeah, so for me, for Washington, Delane would certainly be on that list. And a name on that list that I haven't seen a lot of other people say, but would be for me is Jordan Tyson. In thinking about that wide receiver across from Terry McLaurin, I love Jordan Tyson's game. It was just the medicals that we were waiting on, and all the reporting that we've gotten on his medicals is that he's been cleared with that. And of course, we saw him working out and looks great. So for me, that's the wide receiver 1 in this class. And then Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles would be the other two that I would toss out, where I would stick and pick there. Potentially those guys get down there. We think that Caleb Downs will. That's a guy where, and I think the Caleb Downs discussion, it sometimes gets lost in the weeds with it. Here's the thing that I would toss out to people, and look, it is a box safety. He didn't test this process. I don't think he would have tested as an elite athlete. So I understand the idea of, like, devaluing a little bit. But what people don't bring up with him, it's the ability, it's a guy that plays in the box. He's playing close to the line of scrimmage. And in modern football, when, now, Kevin, as you know, we have so much subterfuge going on the offensive side of the ball, attempting to manipulate the defense, and you bring out the multiple tight ends, and you have the shifting around, and we can switch between 3 wide receivers, and now we're in 12 personnel. Okay, we're here. We're bringing out a 3rd tight end now. The ability for a guy inside the box to essentially tell his teammates, this is what's about to happen, or that guy shifting right there, it's always a play to this side, right? Like, they run to the left out of this formation outside of the tackle when they shift that guy. You see him constantly on film pointing it out. Okay, that right there, it's coming here, or run, pass. It's a guy that's telling you stuff in advance. And again, modern NFL and that sort of that ability, the guy who's like that sort of storyteller, but he's a second ahead of everybody else. I think it's going to be so helpful at the next level, in addition to the instincts after the snap, right? Like, and how you see him flying around and then going and detonating bombs, as it were, but before they go off, whatever. That's the kind of guy that Caleb Downs is. So I think it's going to be super valuable in the NFL. And in a class like this, like you're mentioning, without those blue chippers at the top, I think you can justify the 7th pick on Downs. I think you absolutely can on Sonny Styles in this sort of a class. And as you know, Adam Peters referred, to his time with Fred Warner there in San Francisco.
And that's
you have a lot of through lines there. Exactly.
So did you just name 4 players that you think potentially could be there in Delane, Tyson, Styles, and Downs? Or are those the 4 that you absolutely wouldn't consider trading back for? Because you didn't mention Love. You didn't mention a guy like Bailey. I don't think Bailey will be there at 7. But Love would be the one that I think a lot of my listeners would be interested to find out what you think. If Love were there on the board at 7 and there was a reasonable trade back opportunity, would you trade back or would you select him?
Love, I only omitted because I don't think there's any chance he's getting to 7. But he would have been on my list as well. If he would be on that short list as well. But yeah, omitted him and Bailey for that reason. And I suppose for my list, I would also toss in Bain, going back to the previous thing that we talked about. But yeah, I don't expect Love to be there, but yeah, absolutely, he would be on that list.
All right, he's a big source of conversation with me because I love, no pun intended, but I don't see the Bijan, McCaffrey, Gibbs, Saquon comparisons. I think like I've said about him, he's Josh Jacobs with better speed, which, by the way, is a tremendous NFL back, but for me, not worth 7. It sounds like you think he's in that elite level category, talent-wise, of the best backs in the game.
Yeah, I mean, on my board, I have him 6th overall.
Yeah.
So, by definition, you kind of have him there. But, like, I agree with you that, some of those elite names where he's just sort of tossed in with that, I agree with that. Like, I don't have him as, like, for instance, Saquon level type prospect. I would just have him, like, a sort of a step behind that. Qualitatively, near Genty, just overall. I probably would have had Love slightly above just because of the preponderance of explosive plays and the ability to, as a receiver, to win down the field as well. But I more or less agree with you, and I especially agree. You were bringing up all the comps, and I love player comps. A lot of these comps that I've seen for Jeremiah Love, I don't see it. You'll see like Jahmyr Gibbs. Well, Jahmyr Gibbs was electric side to side.
Yes,
he can make you miss right in front. That's not Love.
I agree.
Love is he's the slingshot guy. It's the guy with the instant NOS button. He pushes that thing and he's out of there. But it's more or less the straight ahead, kind of. The other thing he loves to do, and this speaks that he's going to try to make you miss in another way, either erase your angle or another thing outside of that agility thing that gives us. Love loves to levitate. He loves to jump over people. If you're going to go low on him in space, he's going to attempt to jump over you. And I'm sure in the NFL, his coaches are going to talk with it because you're going to see the pogo stick thing with him. And I'm sure there's going to come a time when his NFL coach are like, bro, you need to keep your feet on the carpet, right? Like, we don't want to risk your injury like that. But I agree with you. And for these reasons, my comp on him has been clear from the very get. He reminds me so clearly of a former high-profile college running back, and that's Reggie Bush. I think this guy is the second coming of Reggie Bush, and I think the NFL is going to use that kind of player better this time around. But I agree with you of not that Saquon Barkley type running back prospect.
All right. If they were, well, hold on wide receivers. So I just want to make sure I am clear. And I'm looking at your board, so I know the answer to this, but I want you to speak to it. You do have Tyson just one spot ahead of Tate. Why?
Love his game so much. Jordan Tyson, there's a natural element to him playing receiver that you don't see with these other guys. And sometimes he gets nitpicked like, oh, he's nonchalant or he's not going. I think that's speaking to how natural he is. And you see it when he's running the routes, just how quickly he can change direction. It's one of those, and I so hesitate to bring this name up. I haven't during the pre-draft process because I don't want people to think that I'm making this comp. But, I've watched a lot of Justin Jefferson, of course, being in Minneapolis and the Vikings and covering them and stuff like that. And that sort of Gumby pliability thing, that it's something that Jordan Tyson also has that Jefferson has. But it's sort of the long strider thing during the route where they can start to toggle the tempo on you like a jet ski because of the way that they move, where it's just impossible to know exactly where is the route break coming. And even if you could accurately guess that, there's no chance that you can. Even if you could, you have no idea what they're going to do in it. And then their footwork is super efficient within it. So that's how they just always throw these throwing windows open for their quarterbacks, especially against man coverage. But really like that aspect of Tyson's game. I think he profiles as a wide receiver one in this class, whereas, for instance, Carnell Tate, who I have right behind him, to me, that guy profiles as an awesome wide receiver two in the NFL. A T. Higgins, a George Pickens, that kind of a guy. Whereas I think Tyson it can be an actual needle mover for an NFL offense. My comp for him is CeeDee Lamb, Jordan Tyson, but like I said, there's a receiver in my neck of the woods too, where I think there's some stylistic similarities there as well.
I loved your comp, by the way, because I think this guy with NFL fans is wildly underrated. You comped Carnell Tate to Nico Collins. Now, is he as tall as Collins? Collins is 6'4", 6'5". Tate's what, 6'2", 6'3"?
Yeah, Tate came in 6'2" and a quarter, which was an inch shorter than we thought we were going to get during the pre-draft measurement. So that is a good point.
But the Collins thing, I think Collins is crazy underrated by most fans. Now, part of it is he's gotten hurt here and there. Part of it's been, the quarterback was hurt for some games last year. But yeah, that's going to be interesting. Washington at 7, if they were to trade back, let's just say that opportunity exists. They only have 6 picks in this draft and only 2 in the top 100, Thor. If they ended up trading back, let's just say with Miami at 11, because the Dolphins have all of those picks, who do you think the best case at 11 for them based on their needs would be?
At 11, I would say, because I think there's a real possibility that Caleb Downs falls out of the top 10. So I would say I would have to put him on the list. I would have to put on one of those two receivers that we just talked about. Both Tyson and Tate absolutely would be in range for me on that. But I think you're looking for one of the fallers in that, and we know that someone attractive is going to fall out of the top 10, be it Downs, be it Bain, there's a couple names that have been sort of bandied about with this. I think it'd be one of those guys monitoring the wide receiver. I don't think there's any chance Delane falls down there, but yeah, that's sort of what I'd be looking for.
Why do you like Delane so much? I like him too. I'm just curious as to why you like him and why you could see him at 7 for Washington.
Yeah, it's one of those, when you start getting reminded so much of different prospect that you really like, that you put your flag down on, and then a guy reminds you so much of it, whether that's your bias or whether that's just, your experience and it's pointing you at another guy that's going to be like that. The evaluation of Delane reminds me a ton a couple years ago of Devin Witherspoon. I think they're very similar players. They play with that same kind of feistiness. off of the line, the ability to press with both of them, even though they didn't have the prototypical dimensions you think of with like those, long, strong outside boundary cornerbacks with that. Just love every phase of that. And then the technical aspect of his game, you're not going to coax any false movement out of him. He doesn't waste any movement. It's just such an efficient player with his movement. So it's just so impossible to shake him. You saw it this year. He literally erased one side of the field at LSU. Quarterbacks just didn't want to throw at him. So, yeah, big fan of his game.
So you got a lot of receivers here in the first round, or in the top 32, I should say, on your big board. You've got 6 of them, and you've talked a lot about Tyson and Tate. There are 2 here, and you've got them in your top 32 on the board, which would make them first-round picks. But I love Boston, and I love Cooper Jr. Tell me about those 2 players and whether or not they would make sense if Washington were to trade back to say, let's now talk about 16 with the Jets.
Yeah, those guys would definitely make sense. And Denzel Boston, you're
Loved
talking there.
Loved your comp for him
on Boston. Yeah, Cortland Sutton. Yeah, it's a guy in the NFL. Sure, maybe not a superstar, but his NFL team is very much going to value him. A wide receiver 2 guy that can stretch the field. He has possession elements there as well, and the ball skills just being so fabulous. But I think with Boston, sometimes what gets lost, he gets, because the people that don't like him, they'll start bringing up like Keon Coleman or like, some of these other people. Keon Coleman, it was straight line guy he got off the carpet, right? Like it was the basketball background with Keon Coleman, and the whole thing with him was throw lollipops to him down the field. Well, that was the one, positive aspect of his evaluation. Denzel Boston can beat you in more levels of the field, and it's a more fully fleshed out athlete. Keon Coleman assuredly could jump higher than him, but just as far as overall athlete, and you've seen Denzel Boston returning kicks and punts, this sort of a thing, and moving in space, just more fluid with that. So for me, that's an easy first round guy. Denzel Boston, I'm sure we're the same page with that. I got him early 20s on my board. Cooper, I think I ranked him like 30, 32. More like end of the first round. 32. Yeah. So very end of the first. Like him as the super duper tough slot guy. Love how he beats zone coverage, and I like how he zooms up the field real quick, transitioning from receiver to runner. Very tough guy. And the spatial awareness of him too, I think, deserves to be brought up, because a guy that is working intermediate there, a guy that knows how to run around, pick through garbage, and then also, as Kevin, with zone, and this is an argument that happened a lot there. And, when we talked about PFF and grading and stuff like that, right. The idea of how can you judge if a receiver is open against zone coverage when every single receiver out on the route is running themselves covered and open in zone constantly? How can you make sort of a determination with that? Cooper is one of those guys that is really good at running himself open in the zone concept and on time. That is the other very important thing with zone. So you can sort of set your watch that he's going to be to the spot at the right time, and then also is going to slightly modify based on the exact zone coverage look that he gets. So I understand how that guy, for the modern NFL, that there is a real value to that. That's why I put him in the first round. I just think you're a bit capped there, because it's definitely a slot guy, and I like him more with the yak and after the intermediate part of the short intermediate, get him the ball, have him work around there, and then have him run. Whereas the downfield thing and then the boundary guys, so just a little bit of a devalue there for me in terms of that. It's a slot a guy that I want in the slot that I just have a bit lower than Mekhi Lemon, who I see as more of a mid first round pick.
So you had, just so everybody knows, and I would urge you to follow Thor on X at Thorku, THORKU. Thor has a Substack column, so I would urge you to. It's a couple bucks a month. It's not much at all, and it's totally worth it. You'll get his complete top 500 big board, which is fun reading again, because he does something that a lot of guys don't do, which is give existing pro or past pro comps for these players. So I love David Bailey. You've got him at number 5. I'm with you on Bain. But the player you have at 31, to me, is a player that I can't believe won't go in the first round, even though he's been mocked on night 2 consistently. You've got him in your top 32 players How does Jacob Rodriguez not go until Friday night?
No idea. Basically, like, to me, it's a first round guy. What other questions do we have about him? And even with the position being devalued last year, fifth in the Heisman, the stats speak for themselves. It's a field flipper guy as well. The peanut punches he does with the fumbles, he's able to jump passing lanes because of how good he is with the film. And the other thing there, former quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Like he went coming out of high school as a dual threat quarterback, went to Virginia. So he really looks at the game from the perspective of a quarterback and is sort of one step ahead of you because of that. The range is really good. And he had gotten nitpicked for the athleticism, and then he comes out, it's a 9'6" RAS athlete in the pre-draft testing, and I do not believe that he ducked any of the tests. So it wasn't one of those guys where it's just a straight line guy, but not the agility, and he doesn't do the agility drills, and then he gets a high RAS. That was on the full complement of it. I don't know what else you need to see there from Rodriguez. And again, even with the devalued thing, if you're going to say that Sonny Styles is a top 10 prospect, I'm not going to argue against you. I don't know how you can say that Jacob Rodriguez is not a top 32 prospect in this draft.
We've talked about several players now that you really like. Give me the player that you don't love as much, the player that you're convinced will be overdrafted.
Way overdrafted. One guy that I would toss out is Deion Burks, the slot receiver from Oklahoma. Deion Burks was displaced from his own role by a teammate they brought in, Isaac Satania, last year. He wasn't even the best on his team at the role that he did, and he can't play anything else outside of manufactured touch slot receiver. I think that's pretty troubling. And you still look around on all these boards, and it has him as a day 2 guy. I don't think so. For me, Deion Burks, it has an undrafted grade on my board.
The guy that I thought you had much lower than probably most is Bain's teammate, Hakeem Mesidor, the edge for Miami last year that played opposite Bain. Why do you have him at 63 on your big board?
The data is not great on, first off, the age that Mesidor is coming into the league.
Yeah.
Then you have an injury rap sheet on him. You have a late breakout kind of a guy. And then you also have a bit of a tweener game, right? I mean, like, is it a 4-3 defensive end? I guess. But he's not going to be playing across from Ruben Bain, just destroying, caving in one side of the line at the next level. He was on a defense around all these superstars playing across from one of the more dominant edge rushers that we've seen in college football over the last 25 years. And he was a, 24, 25-year-old beating one-on-ones in college. Like, I mean, great, and I have you as a high third-round pick, which I think is, for me, a 25-year-old with injury problems that I see as a bit of a tweener that got a lot of opportunistic counting stats. That, to me, that's pretty bullish, actually. It's just not in terms of the consensus, but I would like someone to point me to data that supports Mesidor as a first-round pick. I don't think it exists. And the tape guys love him, of course, but the tape guys, they never will bake in, this is a 25-year-old beating a 20-year-old, right? You have to be able to do that. And so yeah, his tape is better, but when you're watching, okay, now I'm watching a 21-year-old, now I'm watching a 22-year-old, the tape of a 25-year-old should be objectively better. So, that's just, what it is. And for me, someone else can have Mesidor.
Yeah. All right. So I want to finish up with this, Thor. I want you to put yourself into the seat of being a Washington fan and tell me what you would be hoping for on Thursday night, based on how you see the board sort of flushing out in front of number 7, but knowing that they've got number 7 and then they don't pick again until Friday night, 3rd round, number 71 overall. So one of your answers here, if you think it's the answer that you'd be hoping for, can be, I'm giving you this option, it can be that they're, offered something to trade back and pick up additional picks. But what would be the thing more than anything else you would be hoping for on Thursday night?
For me, it would probably be Delane at number 7, and then with the 3rd round pick, because Washington doesn't have a second, right?
Yep.
With the 3rd round pick, we would probably be looking at best available between receiver, center, and then I'm going to toss in linebacker too, because I like the depth there, and I'll toss in running back as well, because we talked about the power alley there of round 3. But those 4 positions, I would probably be, just because someone's going to fall down there from one of those 4 positions that shouldn't be there. So that's kind of how I would do it. I would take care of the cornerback thing early and then go the other position But after that, that's how I do it.
Real quickly, who is center number one? Because they don't necessarily have their center right now.
Yeah, for me, it's Brian Parker, the second converted tackle from Duke, although he converted to tackle at Duke as coming from being the number 5 rated center coming out of high school. So Brian Parker is a center. It's just Duke wanted him to play a tackle, which makes sense, best offensive lineman kind of a thing. But I have him just slightly ahead of Logan Jones, my center 2, who I have just slightly ahead of my center 3, Sam Hecht. And then I also have Jake Slaughter and Trey Zune, left tackle at A&M, but going to be a center at the next level. I have them all grouped fairly close together on my board. And then Connor Liu, who some people have as the center 1. I have just a little break between those top 5 to Connor Liu. I have Connor Liu as like a mid-4th round kind of a guy. But the top 5 guys for me, I think those guys could all start in the league next year. So for me, as a team that needs a center, and the Vikings do too, use your 3rd round pick, get one of those 5 guys.
So 71's not too early for a Parker out of Duke.
Not to me. He's right around there on my board. But I also think, you get to that point in the draft. So let's say it is center. That's the thing you're monitoring. None of those names have gone off the board because that is a possibility as well. It might be latter half of the 3rd round. Maybe that thing kicks off just a little bit after Washington. If Washington also sees the center class, and maybe they even toss Lou into that. So maybe it's a 6-man group for them, but however they see it, if it's a bigger group like that and it gets to your pick and the first one has not come off the board yet, why not explore a bit of a trade down and try to hit that run in the middle, pick up another pick? I think that's what I would do.
You're always great. Really appreciate the time. Enjoy the rest of the week. And I guess we'll talk next year. Thanks, Thor.
Thanks so much for having me on, Kevin.
Thor Nystrom, everybody. Odyssey Sports Draft coverage is presented nationally by Bet365, where winning is everything. Download the Bet365 app and lock in your picks before the game begins. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in select states only. And draft coverage is also brought to you by Liberty Mutual Insurance. Only pay for what you need. The NBA playoffs got better last night, but the broadcast in multiple situations is not great. More on that next. This is my all-time favorite Prince song, The Beautiful Ones from Purple Rain. 10 years ago today, the GOAT, in my opinion, died of a fentanyl overdose. He had back issues, pain issues that he dealt with for a long period of time and got addicted to pain meds and died from a fentanyl overdose. Really, really sad when you think about that stretch of him and Petty and Chris Cornell. There was just a stretch there during those years of one great musician after another passing away. But he's my number one of all time. And I think he'll go down as perhaps the greatest musician in terms of fronting a rock act of all time, because he played everything at an elite level. Certainly one of the 10, 15 greatest guitarists of all time. His band member when it was the Revolution, Wendy Melvoin, who was 19 when she joined the Revolution during those 80s years, because it kind of morphed into different groups after that. But when it was Wendy, Lisa, and the Revolution, Wendy said about this song, The Beautiful Ones, that they recorded it in LA, and she walked in and she heard him playing it, and she just stopped and said, "You are," and this was in 1983, 84, as they were getting ready for Purple Rain, "you are at the height of your creativity, and nobody does it better." Great song. Great, unbelievable musician. And 10 years ago, man, time has flown. So if you've been watching the NBA playoffs, the games sucked over the weekend. We talked about that yesterday, but at the beginning of the show today, the games last night perked up a bit. I mean, that Hawks-Knicks game and the CJ McCollum performance, unbelievable down the stretch. The Nuggets-T-Wolves game was really, really good. Look, the Cavs-Raptors game, I was watching more than Knicks-Hawks, but it was better. But so far, not great on the broadcast. At the end of the Knicks-Hawks game last night, which was on NBC, you know, NBC has the NBA back if you're just kind of tuning in now for the postseason. You know, NBC's back with the NBA. Games are on NBC. They're on Peacock. Games are on ESPN. They're on ABC. They're on Amazon Prime. But last night on NBC, with the Knicks down a point after two CJ McCollum misses from the free throw line, the Chiron bug that shows the timeouts showed that the Knicks still had a timeout, but they did not. A lot of fans were confused as to why the Knicks did not call a timeout. Well, it's because they didn't have one. But the score/time/timeout Chiron bug indicated that they did. But that's not nearly as bad as the Amazon Prime issues. The Amazon Prime issues during the play-in tournament, we had technical difficulties before the best game until last night of the postseason, which was Charlotte-Miami in play-in round game a week ago tonight, actually. Technical difficulties during the overtime. Big screen. I mean, 70s style. Technical difficulties. Not to mention, man, Amazon Prime. Somebody told me recently that more people now have Amazon Prime than have ESPN. Maybe that's true because so many people have gotten rid of cable. But you'd think they'd replace it with YouTube TV, but they're not. They're replacing it with just all of the streaming services. But I'm telling you, when you're in Amazon Prime or you're in Peacock and you're watching sports, it's just hard, Max. Is it me? It's just hard to just switch out and go to something else during commercial breaks. You pretty much have to stay there.
Yeah, I think they've done a very good job at designing it exactly that way. So you're locked in and like scrolling on your phone as opposed to browsing the channels. I think that's kind of why we have the streaming model now.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. You know, I was away a couple of weeks ago, and staying in a hotel, it's not like you got Amazon Prime. I guess I could log into Amazon Prime if I even knew my login, because I'm already logged in at home.
And then you got to remember to log out when you leave.
And then you got to log out, or somebody else is going to just take advantage of your Amazon Prime. But the game, you can't just flip on a TV and go to broadcast or cable and have the games very easily. Old man screaming about watching games. Man, there's just so many outlets now that cover all of this. All of the hockey, though, is essentially on non-streaming services, correct?
So yeah, it was on Hulu last night. Well, I mean, I'm a Hulu subscriber, so
am I. But
with live
I didn't
TV,
know. So NHL games are on.
They're
these
on
playoff games are on Hulu too.
Well, they're on ESPN and TNT.
Okay.
And then last night I was having some trouble trying to find the overtime stints in Ottawa and Carolina because they had already started to show the game that was after, that was Oilers Kings. So it was a little bit of a scramble, but made it to ESPN3. Was able to lock in. Saw the goal that was not a goal, saw the penalty shot, and then saw Carolina finally pull it out in double OT. Great game.
All right, we got to run. Back tomorrow. Chris is next.